Thank you.
Sometimes it's difficult for me to speak to an unseen crowd.
I'm going to start, Rabbi Kamenetsky. I'm going to start. Okay, Shalom Aleichem. Everybody's coming tonight to the Shir. Again, tonight is a special program. Let's get real with Coach Menachem Bernfeld. Tonight is our 52nd Shir. We're doing this, Baruch Hashem. It's been going for a long time, and I want to thank everybody on the platform. It's been exploding. People have been talking. A lot of viewers the last few weeks. We had a lot of powerful shiurim from Rabbi Elephant. We had Rabbi Kalish, and I got feedback from all over the world from what's been going on. So Baruch Hashem, and a lot of people are coming. And again, it's every Sunday night. It's the same Zoom channel. And tell people about it. Be mechazik. Anybody's watching this on YouTube, please click on the subscribe button and the like button, so Menachem can get a lot of views. And you can get to see all the new shiurim. And I want to give a special thank you to the Lakewood Scoop for always promoting us here in Lakewood. This is our home base. Special thank you to Rabbi Yanif from Chazak. And special thank you to Chayla Kaufman and Shmuel Summer from JCN Jewish Content Network for always promoting us on all the Jewish platforms. Again, next Sunday, we're going to have a very, very special shiur. So I'm going to tell everybody about it now. We're going to have a therapist. His name is Glenn Holman. He's somebody who specializes in grief and loss. So it's going to be a very emotional shiur. We're going to talk about people that lost loved ones, people that have sicknesses, or all of us have some type of personal losses in our lives. So we're definitely going to talk about it. Bring some tissues, and it's going to be a very environmental shiur, and it should be mechazik thousands and thousands of people. Again, the Coach Menachem shiur is collaborating with OK Clarity to bring greater health and wellness to the Jewish community. OK Clarity is the online platform for mental health, supporting the Jewish community, and you can find the best therapists, coaches, and nutritionists over there. Again, tonight we have the schus of having the Shiva Philadelphia, Rabbi Sholom Kamenetsky here with the mechazik us. And before the Shiva starts, let's start out with Coach Menachem Zoga a psicha for the shiur.
Shkoyach. Welcome everyone. Baruch Hashem, we're here another week, another Sunday night. We should have this first to have Rabbi Sholom Kamenetsky. I want to thank everyone for the feedback, the questions that were sent in, the feedbacks from the past shurim, the donations that people give. Everything is really appreciated. And tonight's topic, elevating our marriage to a higher level. So before we start tonight's topic, I need to mention that from the emails that came in, the truth is everybody in their own marriage, you might hear things that might feel a little bit hard. There are people out there who are seeing therapists, are going for help, are trying to build, trying to figure things out. And when you hear things, sometimes it could feel like a loss, sometimes even in a marriage when you're married, but sometimes emotionally something is missing. So be kind to yourself with compassion. And when you hear things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, be okay. It's not easy, but obviously, hopefully we'll hear a little bit of ideas that even though you might think that it's not for your marriage, you tried already many years, but just to be open to it. You never know, by doing the shtadlis, by hearing the things that we're going to hear tonight in Mitzvah Hashem. And Baruch Hashem, we have this first to have with us, Rabbi Sholom Kamenetsky, to give us a little bit chizik and some ideas in marriage, whichever level it is, to take it to the next level in Mitzvah Hashem, to understand a deeper meaning, and everybody should be able to apply wherever they are to be able to go to the next step in Mitzvah Hashem. Agros and Shkoyach.
Shkoyach, Coach Menachem. The shiur before he goes, I just want to, tonight, we're going to do the shiur, the schus, refuah shalema. The shiur should be a schus, refuah shalema for Shlomo Eliyahu ben Liba. And so it should be a schus for him, also to find the shidduch b'karev. And schus again to have Rabbi Sholom Kamenetsky, the shiur of Philadelphia, tonight with us. Please open up with psicha.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Obviously, it's a platform which goes way beyond the screen. It's hard to know who else is sitting out there. At times, I find it difficult to speak to an unseen audience. From the first decidus of any speech, you understand, know the audience. Here, the audience is not seen, it's imagined. Maybe we should help them. We should desire to say the right words. I could not do more than prepare myself, try my best to give something, an idea, and convey an idea. And Hashem Ma'an Loshin, that Kadosh Baruch Hu should give you the skills to say the proper words. Truth be told, Shalom Bayis is a very, very broad subject. Obviously, there are books out there, there are contrasting out there, there's all kinds of things, and everyone has great ideas. Very often, speaking about ideas, it's Chloe, It's very Yisoidi and it's basic. There's no question. Very, very Yisoidi. We have to bear in mind that there are no two situations that are the same. So as much as we have clothing and Yisoidis that will apply to us all, let us all understand that obviously one has to be careful with the pratim. As much as we say that they're clothing, pratim are very, very important. It's a lot of objective terms, but very often the discussion becomes a subjective one. Very much for sure to the people we're talking to. Number two, another one point before we continue, and that's to say, if you open remarks, which we'll do, but after it's followed by questions. I want to make it clear. As much as questions are asked, you understand a cloud. Once when I say this, if Tzaddik Baruch said, you don't answer questions, you answer the questioner. They're very specific to the person who asks. And every question has to be addressed to the question, the person who asked the question. So although I'll say something closely to answer the question, when it comes down to pratim, I have enough experience in this particular field. It's never the same. Always has to do with individuals, personalities. It always has to be tweaked and understood in context. Let's make that clear. We'll share with you a point that I very often share with my Hassanim. I'll elaborate on it, but the Hassanim that come here for their chosn shuls before they get married. It's short. It's a couple points. There's one very basic point to start with that I think was very, very Yisoidi. Let's start. You know that the Sheva Brachos that we say, Shastin is too, we say Sheva Brachos. The Sheva Brachos are very, very telling. They address many things about chastus. And there's a question which is raised. There's a bracha we say, we don't say it only once, we say it twice. The whole bracha seems somewhat superfluous. Ohata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam yotzer ha'odam. Yotzer ha'odam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made man. Yotzer ha'odam. Obviously, as the Mepharshim asks the obvious question, Yotzer ha'odam is a bracha to be made. Shas leidas ha'odam, shas milas aben. But Yotzer ha'odam, to put down a bracha which is Yotzer ha'odam, Yotziras ha'odam at the time that we have chasna, is something somewhat strange. And to add to the shayla, it's repeated. Second bracha we say again, Asher Yotzer ha'odam v'tzalma v'tzalma v'hiskelo v'menu v'inyan adayad Baruch atah Hashem Yotzer ha'odam. The bracha is repeated twice. Yotzer ha'odam. What's why Yitzir? What's the question? What's this Yitzir Chadosha? Rashi there, Pshat explains. There's a ladder of brachas and the brachas that deal with the student. The first one is to speak about clothing is Kvayda Shalmokim, Yitzir comes together. Then we mentioned something about Yitzir Sa'odam, a reference to Adam Arishay. And in that context, we continue with the second bracha. We say, we talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving Adam Arishay the matan of Arisha. That issue was the Binyan Adayat, we continued, and we finally entered the phase in the discussion of Birchas Nesud. That's what Rashi understands that there's a discussion. Let's try best to understand in context of Adam Arisha. See, there's an oivik in the words of Rashi. We speak about Brias Ha'adam. There's a statement which is said, Loi toiv hayos Adam lavavli. Loi toiv. In contrast to the rest of Brias Ma'aser Bereshis, the statement is, Ayalakim kitoi. Ayala say kitoi. Everything's kitoi. And here we speak about Adam Arisha says, Loi toiv. Something's missing. Loi toiv hayos Adam lavavli. That's an easy connector. The other question, and Medrash poses the question, in everything the Bria HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, V'yalakim kitoi, saw that it was good. Where's the Riyas kitoi that we find the Adam Arisha? Where's the mention about Adam? Tzirius Adam L'churi is so important. Where does it say anything about the Bria that is also good? The Medrash says as follows: Ayalakim es kol asher asad hine toiv ma'oid. Oisi is the day, ka'oisi is the day. Toiv ma'oid, the oisi is ma'oid is Adam. Toiv ma'oid is toiv Adam. So the one place we find the mention of the Hatov of Brias Adam is in context of the pasuk Ayalakim es kol asher asad hine toiv ma'oid. You don't use the word Adam, we speak about ma'oid. Putting these two ideas together, something very interesting emerges. Ayalakim es kol asher asad. Kadosh Baruch Hu saw everything he did. The ma'odius of Adam is good. Adam, when he's ma'od, he's expanded. He brings his kashas out. He's developed. That's the hatava. Another one is created as a loy toy. He's not yet finished. Everything in the bria is exactly what it is. The Kadosh Baruch Hu made it, and the riyah kitay, the Kadosh Baruch Hu looks at the bria and says, "This is good, as made, as produced, as is. Baruch Hashem, it's good." Adam is a loy toy. There's a lot of the Brias Adam. We speak about the Hatov in its Hashlam, we speak by Yalakim as Kol Hashem Toiv Ma'od, Toiv Adam. There's a Ma'odius. There's something more. There's something expansive, something profound in the fact that Adam is a loitoid in creation, but when he gets married, when it's loitoid, that Eze Kenegdos brings out the Hatova, but it's not simply Hatova. It's Hatova which is described with the Ayalakim as Kalash Asa in a Toiv Ma'od. So it's being single Kiviyach, so to speak, is loitoid. It's a status of loitoid. There's a Chisar, there's a Nikuda Nissi. Speak about it back to speak about it's finished, it's Toiv Ma'od. The Hatov of Tzuras Adam is the Ma'odi Shabbat. Point is very clear. Speak about a person has koiches. We all have koiches. And there's nothing which is more frustrating, devastating to a person than undeveloped, unbrought koiches that are not brought out the way they should be. We all look for success. We all strive for success. We all crave success. And the success, Chazal tell us, the understanding these psukim is such that we speak about a hashlama. A hashlama of the other in the sense that there's a low type sense until it becomes nigmar, and then we speak about the hatav and tzuras adam, which is toiv ma'od, toiv adam. That hatav is when it's the ma'odius. There's so much more. It's an expanded form. It's not limited. There's so many koiches that were latent, so many koiches that were the potential within man, which comes out for both adam and chava, for the ish and isha. That's the pshat in the toiv loy toiv. So we speak about Baruch Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Yitzer HaAdam. We've made Adam. Here Rashi explains it's talking about Adam Arisha. Let's for a moment focus. One time the Gemara tells us Adam Arisha was nibra du partzufin. Du partzufin is a shleimus. There's a du partzufin in that Brias Adam. It was part Zachar Lekeva Bara Isam, created as a Zachar Lekeva. Yet that was still in the status of Bari Torah. There's no panim, no panim. There's no separation to create that Riyah called the Ezer Kenegda, the panim upon the vision, which once HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the Isha, Mila Adam. At that point, we can speak about the Toiv Ma'od Hashlam. The point we speak, and we drive home to the Chassan, is not the Shtikol Torah, but rather the understanding which is the Tover Yisoidi in marriage. We were to ask a secular person about a good marriage. His reaction says, well, it's the following model. It's what we call I plus I equals we. Mutually beneficial, it's good for you, it's good for me. We understand we made a partnership of sorts. A wonderful partnership. I bring my mindless to this, you bring your mindless, and together we'll forge and make something. We understand that we have an achrayus to each other. There's a responsibility. It sounds wonderful. I plus I equals we. Yet in Yiddishkeit, it's a mistake. In Yiddishkeit, it's much deeper, much sharper. The formula is I plus I equals I. It's a newly formed creature, a newly formed creation. It's an Odeh B'chav, B'tzura Achas. That's the Yotzer HaOdeh, the brachas, Yotzer Adam, the Yetzirah Chadosha. So the beauty of these two psukim, these two brachas rather is as follows. It starts, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Yotzer HaOdeh. It was the Yetzirah Chadosha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made man. By Yitzer Hashem, Elokim Adam, offered in Ha'adam. But he made him do pratzuf. Well, not yet. That was not yet. Rather, the Ezer Kenegda was not yet there. But there's a oneness. There's a starkness. Finally, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes Tzir Shni, which is called the Hiskin Loy Mimenu Binyan Adayan. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made from himself, from the other. He can make over here Binyan Adayan. We can build. He can make something new. Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaOdeh. There's Yetzirah Chadash. We always quote Chazal. A person before he gets married is called Palgid the Gufa. It's a Palgid Gufa. He's a Plag Gufa. He's only half. He's not complete. It's literal. I plus I equals I. It's a recreation of something new. Till there was him and there was her. Together they create. What's the nafkimina, the deal between I plus I equals we and I plus I equals I? Let me explain. We all fully understand that we have minus and we have plus minus. We'll fully understand that we view ourselves as more or less good people. We're shleimim to a degree that we are, knowing full well that we're not shleimim. We still have a place for growth. We still know that certain things that are imperfections about ourselves. There are talents that we have which are really great. There are talents that we don't have. In simple terms, I might be a righty. I'm not a lefty. I can't write with my left hand. There's a chesed of sorts. I can't write with my left hand. I may be great in mathematics. Reading and writing is not my talents. I may be great in words. I can read and I can speak. Wonderful speaking. Numbers isn't my talent. We all understand fully that we have minus and we have concerns. That's who we are. A person calling Mechayev is called Adam. Adam in Ha'adama. Adam means there's always potential. There's always power. There's always what to grow from. Aral explains, the person is living to a tree, which means this constant growth. You never stop producing. And we all understand that we have our minus and chesronis. And the same is true when it comes to our spouses. Our spouses too have their minus and chesronis. And they are also people with shlemios, involving minus. At the same time, they're not perfect. None of them are perfect. I plus I equals we means let's share only with the perfections, the good parts, that Venn diagram where we cross each other. We both could share to this. Our foibles, our lack, our chesronis, let's leave this out of the circle. We speak about I plus I plus I. It's a recreation of a Bria Chadasha called an I that has all those minus and all those chesronis. You know, it's interesting. Person in a good state of mind doesn't self-deprecate. He's not mevatel himself. He understands he has Baruch Hashem a good self-image. And although he knows he has chesronis, he knows things about him that are not perfect. But overall, I'm a good guy. That's how he views himself. As does his wife. Overall, I'm a good person. I'm a good woman. I'm a great person. I have minus, not chesronis. We put the two together, we form this newly integrated I. What happens is as follows. Each spouse has to view and see that my minus and chesronis at this point are not mine alone, they're mine and my spouse's. My spouse's chesronis are my chesronis, my spouse's minus and my minus as well. And each one sees the exact same thing. And the same way one has an unbelievable good view about oneself and appreciates oneself with those minus and with those chesronis, with all its foibles, with all its drawbacks, all its shortcomings, if you will. But that's who I am. One doesn't beat oneself up. From this point on, one understands that marriage creates this I plus I individual, where suddenly there is no motive for criticism, no motive for anything besides the fact that das bin ich. I've been recreated to have something which is an amazing thing. I am now all the minus and chesronis of my wife. I'll take the example. Some men are perpetually late. The wife is very punctual, let's say, she likes to be on time all the time. And her husband is not so good, he's pretty slow. Slow, doesn't get things together, he's not a clock person, he's not a timely person. But now this newly formed integrated bria called Ish the Isha, the Yitzira Chadasha, that Yitzira other which was previously stated as one, that afterwards the other, it's again the Yitzira Adam. At this point, the wife has to come to terms and understand, I am no longer that punctual person. From this point on, I understand that I won't be so timely. Time has become one of my chesronis. I can live with it. There's no place for criticisms. I insist in this Chassan and I tell you, understand, as much as at this point you see Kulei Ma'ila in this column, you'll get married, you'll find that she's a person like any other person. And there are Ma'ilas and chesronis that she has. But the I plus I model tells you very clearly, there's no mocking, nothing in your mind to criticize. Work with it. At this point, you've become something different. A lot of Ma'ilas, all the Ma'ilas of the wife, all the Ma'ilas your Kala is giving you. At the same time, all her drawbacks are yours. There's no fixing it. There's no changing it. There's living with it, making the best of it, and together there's growth. This, I feel, is what's one of the most fundamentally exciting in Yiddishkeit when it comes to chasdus. To view it as a bria chadasha. Zocher Nekeva Bara Oisam. We call them one Adam. It's called an Adam B'Yachad. That Adam B'Yachad has now a joint job, a joint matorah, that together, of course, it brings out the me'odius of them both. At this point, Vayar Lakimas Kol Asher As to be a toiv ma'od. The toiv ma'odius, the me'od that we have not created in this bria chadasha called Ish the Isha, is an amazing thing. It goes very far. It creates worlds. It makes changes. And about we understand fully that the husband changes, the wife changes, and they grow together. But it's a bria chadasha. When I steig, the husband steigs, the wife steigs. When she grows, then he changes herself, the husband grows. It's not seen as two separate individuals moving along as a shutfis. It's a bria chadasha. It's one and the same. We call it, the analogy would be given, we call it rayosi. Rayosi, term reya. Yahavta l'reach al kamoicha. It's an interesting word. The word reach al sound means friend. Reya mahuvim. It's reya mahuvim. What's reya? It's an interesting word. It comes from the word B'Shevet Basel Tziroi, it means to break. The word friend to break seems to be oxymoronic. That's exactly the point. True Reya, true Rayosi, true spouse is such that if it's not forged as one, it's not put together, at that point, it's Ra, it's Troyim, it's broken, it's Trua, it's pieces. True Reya means the opposite. It's when we become one. There's an extent of where we have one. Moshel Chazal is Yad Yamin Yad Smur. One does not berate his left hand for not writing. One says, my two hands is part of who I am. That's the Yisrael of Chastis. I'm ready for questions in the Menachem. Anyone?
Sure, Shira, really appreciate it. Beginning, you weren't so clear, but I think it got a little better, the volume, the clarity that people were saying. If you could speak a little slower, maybe it would be better with the echo. But before we start with the questions, we have a bunch of questions that came in, and then everybody should ask. We have Rosh here tonight, and let's ask our. It's not for us to shalom bias questions, obviously. It's for our neighbors and for our friends, so there's nothing to be embarrassed about, and you can feel free to feel comfortable. We're going to take a little poll from the Olam, and then we'll get into some questions. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so everybody on the shir tonight, how would you rate your relationship? Again, it's anonymous. We don't know who's saying what. Let's see. How do you relate your relationship? My relationship is overall either A, growing, B, stagnant, or C, needs help. The second question is, the areas I would like to learn more about are A, how to empathize with my spouse, B, how to listen better, C, how to be more present, D, how to be more giving. So if anyone can answer, we get a little feeling from everybody. We're going to talk about a little bit tonight, some of the questions. Okay, everybody 5 seconds, we'll answer that, and then we'll jump into some questions. And again, anybody wants to ask a question, please text me, Usher Parnes, and we'll put you on. Again, live questions go first, and we're going to try to cover a lot of ground tonight with Rosh Shiva, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's end this. Let's share it with everybody. So most people here tonight, they feel the relationship is growing 69%, 14% of the people feel stagnant, and 17% of the people need help. A growing oilam. The areas I'd like to learn more about are how to empathize with my spouse. Empathy is the number one answer. How to listen better is 14%. How to be more present is 34%. And how to be more giving, how to be more present and how to be empathized. It seems like it's pretty close. Yeah. So you could exit from your screen and then we'll get into some questions. Let's start with the first basic question over here.
Yes, sir.
What would you say a man could do to get closer to his wife? If he feels that he's not connected with her, he feels disconnected from her.
Good question. A little bit I addressed it just openly to understand what his approach to marriage is. Marriage, as I said before, it's Reya Mahuvin. There's a Reya concept and a Huvin concept. There's a oneness that has to be present. Looking at a marriage as something just my convenient spouse is something which is detrimental. It doesn't work. So first has to be an approach. Approach has to be, I fully understand that it's one with me. I am one with my spouse, and whatever I have and my growth is something that she grows as well, and her growth is mine. Next, there's a need to put time into this. Time together, sacred marriage time. In other words, there has to be some point of dialogue. We have to be able to talk to each other. Yeah, there's also marriage isn't a question of you do your life, I do my life, and there's a status of nothing bad. Marriage has to be a continual oneness. Usher Sholom and Roima, Asiya Sholom, Sholom Bayis means you're talking about a constancy, a positive action, what's making it. One must find sacred time which puts the two of them together. There has to be Lucia. I'll give you a hint of something which I think is very, very important, and it helps very much. It's called Hakora Satori. Let me tell you something about Hakora Satori. The Chazal, in their beautiful language, say something different from what we used to in the American culture. We used to have the idea of thank you, hello, please, goodbye. We're very well mannered. When I speak about the American thank you, what comes to mind is driving through the Easy Pass. It says Easy Pass paid, thank you. Who exactly is thanking you for that? Is it the plastic maker? Is it the New Jersey State Police? Is it the Turnpike Authority? It's so plastic, it's worthless. Chazal, when they're in the way, say something so powerful. They say one has to have a Hakora Satori, not a Hakora Sametiv, a Hakora Satori. But what one needs to have is to realize and understand the study. What's the Hatova? What have I gotten from the person? How much can I have to appreciate what the person is giving me? After I fully appreciate that, and again, we're talking about it in a very normal way, just be aware of the fact that your spouse has done things for you. Stop and think about the fact that spouse has done things for you. Once that's appreciated, You then say the words thank you. You got to appreciate. You have to say those words. And that thank you goes so far in making the connection. And Isha strives for that thank you. She thrives on that thank you. She needs the Hakara Shalbayda. Chazal told us very clearly. The same is true about an ego of a man. He needs that. He needs to be recognized and appreciated. And the way it's done is each one recognizing, studying, and understanding what was the Hatava that my spouse did for me. What was it that the spouse did for me, and appreciate it, not what's in it for me, but to look, stop to feel what my spouse has done for me. My husband made it the parnasa, my wife cooked me supper, just to appreciate the fact that something's been done for me, and then say, thank you. That thank you goes very, very far in connecting to people. One has to understand that you're not talking about changing each other. It's very important. The relationship has to be built the fact that we share things in common. It has to be what's called mutual respect. I fully respect you, not the same necessarily, but respect. Mutual respect gives me the opportunity to appreciate your niceness, to express the fact that I appreciate your niceness, to understand, to share your day, to hear what your day was like, to learn how to listen. Not listening just to do it to the yotes of the mitzvah, but rather when we speak about empathy, I think one of the questions was empathize. Indeed, empathy is so important, but it becomes so much more powerful when you just think about the starting model. It's I plus I equals I. That model will take you so far in understanding that you're not here to appreciate your wife, you're here to appreciate yourself. Now you have to understand that sorrow your wife went through, you have to understand the pain that you're going through. Indeed, it's your wife's arm that hurts, but it's the pain you're going through. That empathy is so powerful because once you understand that it's you that's going through this, and that every single thing that happens is not shared, it's one and the same. So you ask the question, how do I increase my ability to relate to her, talk to her, listen to her, understand that anything she tells you is yourself. It's your building, it's your being, it's your hatzlacha. Your wife is here to have zita that you're matzir because she is your hashlama. Just like you're there to see that wife is hushlam with what she is. She gets so much of the fact that there's this hashlama between the two of you. You both bring different cultures to the table, obviously, and that's the sheer oneness that you have in the I plus I still equals I.
I just want to continue with the mashal of the I plus I equals I, like the Rashiva mentioned in the opening, that it becomes another I, and just like I'm okay with my chesroinus, with my weaknesses, now we have a different set of weaknesses. So the real question is, what should a person do if he's not okay, or he or she is not okay with their own weaknesses before they get the weaknesses of the other spouse?
That's a great question. The first thing I tell the Hassanim when I meet with them, I say like this: feel good about yourself? Yes. You have a good self-image? Yes. Your self-confidence? Yes. So because Chalil, if it's not, your marriage is doomed because every story you have, you're going to blame on your wife anyway. So it's far from Pasha.
They say yes so fast?
I'm sorry?
Do they say yes so fast on those questions?
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. You produce a good product, Baruch Hashem. Yeah, when there's a question about it, we'll discuss that before I start the Chassid Shmuz. Let's tweak that. Let's be sure that it's there. But it's very important. Indeed, that's what happens. In other words, chassidus comes in very often. The tension in the marriage is not a question of the spouse. It's a question of self-image. Let me explain. Second, one self-image is not perfect. So there, the marriage, the whole dynamic changes. No longer is it a oneness of all of us together in this, but there it's a search. I'm on a quest. I'm on a search. Tell me that I'm good. Tell me. Please tell me. And once there's a lack of self-confidence, self-image, it's never enough. And whatever the spouse says will not be able to satiate the needs of a person who doesn't have a good self-confidence. It's such an important nekuda. I think very often marriages, when it comes to the difficulties in marriage, the first thing that needs to be tweaked is the self-image of each spouse. What's your nekuda? What bothers you as a person, as an individual? And again, I won't in any which way act in the capacity of a therapist, but we've had enough experiences to be able to say that we understand Koiches HaNefesh, to say that the first thing is, who bist du? Who helps du? What are you thinking about yourself? Let's hear what your problems are, where are your challenges. And more often than not, I find you tweak that, you clarify that, you put it into perspective on both sides of the coin, on both spouses' part. More often than not, then you see where the clash comes. It's generally the point where there's a lack of self-confidence in one of the two spouses. It's something where one it's self-disparaging, self-deprecating, when there's something where one of the spouses doesn't feel good about oneself. And that's where the problem usually shows itself. Because there, I'm used to take and not to give. You know the word ahava. Word ahava is from the shorish hav, which means to give. Ahava is the noun of giving. That's what it means. It's all about giving. When I speak about giving, you're talking about it's not what's in it for me. That's the I plus I equals we model. I plus I equals I means it's in it, for I, for this entity called the two of us. Indeed, as I said, Menachem, there's no question. Second, you talk about the schwachkeit in the personality. That needs to be addressed almost first. It's very often they'll have difficulties in going further in this marriage and straightening this marriage out and appreciating the marriage if that self-confidence, the self-image is not first tweaked. It's important. Again, the two can be worked on simultaneously. And once the other spouse understands the nakuda where the spouse lacks the self-confidence, the spouse can be part of the process. Chalila, I don't need to make one spouse a counselor for the next. That's not healthy. That's not a issue. But when you have the seichel, the wherewithal, and again, let's not forget, I should have presented, I should have, said, be mad in everything I said, because Baruch has given us all the gift of seichel. Let's use it. It's so important. It's very, very important to use seichel. Let's not forget that. But with a little seichel, so the spouse can be the one that helps and gives the self-confidence to the spouse, picks the spouse up, and understands then the problem, where the difficulties are, where one could be careful not to chalila go to those triggers and those nakudas, because indeed understands now the spouse needs the security, needs the help, needs the chizuk in a particular area, and then it works itself out wonderfully. At that point, nafshi ani chayav l'cho, nafshi ani chayav l'cho. The two have a certain feeling that aside from the fact that we've married each other and we've become that one entity, that I plus I equals I, at this point, you're giving me my sense of self, my own sense of self. Thank you. You've done so much for me. Once we appreciate that, it's an amazing thing. Rav, the Gemara tells us, Yevomis Rav, you looked into his life. He didn't have a wonderful shalom. When he looked and he saw the minus, he said, you do so much for us, and I appreciate that. And he was able to make it last wonderfully. Looking at the larger picture, there's so much more here than the kuda, where there's difficulties, where there's a given challenge.
Very good.
Let's say Menachem, I want to ask a question. Yeah. There's a live question, so let's go first to the live, if that's okay. Okay, you're on.
The Rosh Hashanah spoke about how a spouse's problem is our pain. So if one spouse is down or in a bad mood because of whatever happened, then it's a little hard when it's also the other spouse's pain, because they'll just both fall into the same rut. Doesn't the other one need to separate a little bit so he could or she could stay happy and give the other one the space to get out of it?
So here's the thing. Let's just describe the case scenario. One Rahman son has fallen to a rut in that place because broken about something that may have happened. The other one has to feel the pain. That does not mean chalila to roll up in bed and curl up in fetal position. It means to go down, to empathize with the pain, to be there with the pain. When the husband feels you're here, you're feeling it, and you're indeed pain. But you keep your sense of self alive. It doesn't mean in any way to break your anoshis. You're still that same healthy person. When we say feel the pain, you're expressing the pain to your husband, but at the same time, you feel the pain in the sense that you haven't lost yourself. You still have the wherewithal. That one spouse that is not in that rut, but is empathizing, still has the kodesh hanefesh, the kodesh haguf, to be able to pull out, because you're not experiencing the pshuta. You are with him there, but it hasn't broken you in the sense that you've gone through what he's gone through, or she's gone through what he's gone through, what she's gone through. That's not what happened. So you have to retain, obviously, you have to retain your emotions. You have to retain the sense of who you are. You're going down to that part, to that level, to be with that individual, just to help the individual out of that. I'm with you. You know, the famous analogy given with the fellow never thought it was a chicken. He couldn't get him to get off the floor until the person sat down and said, okay, I'm also a chicken. And eventually get that person out. In other words, when it doesn't mean, I don't mean to show by this. I don't mean anything still. It's not being Pollyannish, that's not the nekuda. In a certain sense, you do feel it. You do feel it, but you still have control of yourself. You're still not that tzibroch and a mensch. You're not the person that has undergone what the spouse has undergone. At this point, it's not more than the fact that I'm here, I feel it, you're my husband, we're in this together. Whatever zets you got, zets you well. If you need help from an outside source to have the reality of the truth of somebody else, that's a wonderful thing. But never should the husband feel that you're looking at it as a nevach. He's a tzibroch and a mensch. Ich bin ganz gesund. No, he can have someone else help the both of you in the sense that we're both dealing with the sugya. We're both dealing with the struggle. I didn't go through the passion he went through, but it's my passion. I'm one with my husband, I'm one of the same. And if the need be, there's somebody from the outside who can help the both of you out, that would be a wonderful thing. That's something which is extremely helpful. It doesn't mean that you end up being the same tzibroch in the person. Be broken, and both of you just wallow in your misery. That's not the nekudah, obviously. You've got to keep the sense of self. And if you can't do it without being empathetic, you need someone else to help you, so be it.
Very good.
This says, you reminds me, what was the name of the Rosh Hashiva that they went to the doctor with his wife, and his wife said, unsere Fuß tust weh.
Yeah. Very good. It's a lot of work for everybody out there to be able to understand and not fall into it. There's a question that came in. It is very hard for me to open up to my spouse about my feelings. Is it only considered a real relationship if we're open and discussing our feelings, that intimate discussion, or it can be a relationship without opening up?
So let me start with the following Divrei Chazal. Chazal is something fascinating. Chazal speak about in the pasuk Michal Moicha Be'elim Hashem. Chazal Sa'atika Be'elim Ela Be'ilmin. At times HaKadosh Baruch Hu Michal Moicha Be'ilmin. Who's like you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that stays quiet. Mashal L'Nahad Avadayim. Think about the following analogy. The Rebbe saying Yeshivtis Talmidim. Talmidim are really into it, very into it. And on the side sits the Bachos, they're using a Bakishtim. He's the one who really a fantastically bright kid. The Rebbe speaking to the class at whole. And then he gives a little bit of a wink to the Talmud, the brilliant Talmud. The Talmud, oh, I got it. There are a lot of things the Rebbe isn't saying, and I realize these things they aren't saying, and I tapped into the thing that he hasn't said. It's a fascinating idea. When you have the ability to connect someone at a deeper level when words aren't spoken. That's a fascinating idea. Now, having said that, there's no question that a spousal relationship, if it's a healthy and good one, there are many things that aren't spoken that's always there. Couples have their way of relating to each other, and they so to speak, we'll call it a body language of sorts, but there's always this exchange of a glance and everything's understood. That is true. But that comes after work of really developing a relationship. The person has a difficulty opening up. Here's a perfect example that was said before. There's a need for the person to work on oneself to be able to be more expressive, to learn to express oneself. Now, of course, sometimes you can't change the nature of the beast. The people are what they are. The people have the particular personalities. But it's important here, even if it's a question of just to a degree, but one needs to speak. Now, I'm not saying relationship is based on speaking. Relationship does not mean it's speaking. Relationship is what comes following the speaking. Speaking to each other develops a relationship. But there has to be a certain sense of expression where the wife feels, or the other spouse feels, that there's nothing hidden. There's a certain amount of how we do relate. And they all do express themselves with the word. The concept of sipur, Chazal tells us. Sipur means tell you a story. And when Sipur tells a story, it means there's a direct relationship between me and you when I speak to you. That relationship is so powerful. It goes from my mind to your heart. We speak to each other. It's hard. It's necessarily dvarim. As I said, after the dvarim are shared, after the words exchanged, indeed, then you have a certain sense of relationship which goes, it doesn't need. There's a michamoicha ba'imnim. Without saying words, the relationship is there. It clicks, it's true. But it's got to start with words. And no, relationship does not need words, but relationships will be built on words spoken between the two of you. It's kedai, to get yourself to train, just some words. Obviously, to listen, you can always listen. A person was given the gift of 2 ears and 1 mouth. He could listen twice as much as he needs. It's perfect double portion. And he's supposed to listen. And he could encourage his wife, you speak. Let me listen. I want to hear what you have to say. Hearing what you have to say, how her day was, is an important thing. At times, speaking less is very good. Chazal tells us, neither the selish nikusavich pain. Indeed, there's more value to being quiet than there is to speaking. But there's a need to be expressive to the degree that the wife you're not a riddle. She understands you're expressing enough to understand that she can understand you. She feels you, she knows you. Now, if she indeed has a relationship, she fully understands you and has that relationship with you not based on speech. You can speak not too much, so be it. But it's always kedai to have some level of exchange of speech between the two of you to develop a relationship. Go ahead.
Okay, let's. We have another live question. Shalom, you're on.
Hi, Shlomo Hashiv for the time. Hashiv spoke about the idea that we all have chesroinus, a husband and a wife. Many times, children will see the chesroinus that a parent has. They might have a quick temper, might be struggling in the Yiddishkeit, might be very slow. Parents might argue. The question is, should parents discuss issues that the children see? Explain that we're also human beings, or should the children just learn on their own, see the parents make up? What should the children's role be when they see the chesroinus of the parents and the parents relating to it?
That is a heavy question. Let me start with this. As much as possible, the children should not see the chesroinus of the parents, as much as possible. You mentioned kas. You mentioned things that are hard to the children. When children reach a certain level of maturity, it's probably to die, but you have the child, that's something I'm working with. Baruch Hashem, my Rabbi, and my wife, or my husband are both helping me here, be able to be that and work that through. If the child has that amount of intelligence and much of understanding to appreciate what's being said. As much as possible, of course, there should be no quibbling, no fighting in front of the children. It's the last thing you want to have. The children have to have a certain sense of serenity in the house. They really, really do. You know, the place where the children grow best, and they nurture best, is the place we'll call it a house where the shechina is very comfortable to be. Very important. The best bracha one can give to Chassan Kala is that the shechina should be comfortable in your home. That's the bracha to give. It should be comfortable in your home. Once you understand it in those terms, shechina should be there. You should be comfortable. That means we are the ones that can make the decisions whether or not a Kadosh Baruch Hu is comfortable in our homes. That happens with the fact that we act in a certain way. We understand that all our actions have opposite and equal reactions. We understand the things, how we relate with each other, is the best we can do is to make a Kadosh Baruch Hu healthy and comfortable in our homes. Then the kids grow up in a wonderful environment. Because to the extent that I heard a Maisa of someone, the child was a very tense child. It was this gala that B'shas evil, when the mother was pregnant with this child, the Shalom Bayis wasn't good. He worked these out. But the child was affected by the tensions in the home during evil. There was indicated, very strong indications to this Nakuda. There's a lot that the child feels with this nefesh in the house. Obviously, every situation needs to be dealt with. But the more we work on seeing to it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is comfortable in their homes, the healthier those children grow up. No, we don't want to tell the children about chesroinus unless the child clearly sees it, questions it, and understands that the parents are working on trying their best. The father and mother are working, trying their best to be sure that they're being sacred themselves. The child can understand and appreciate that at a certain level of maturity. Little children can't understand it, I guess.
Don't ask Rosh Hashiva a question. It was written from a man to a woman, but if we could go globalize it, I think it's a very important question. The question is written like this: My wife is a bit overpowering personality. I let her make the decisions and basically do whatever she wants when it comes to whatever in our marriage, in our life. How can we work together with her? And also, I should have a say in the marriage. So basically, the question is, when one spouse has a very strong, dominant personality and it's their way or the highway, how could the other spouse who's more machnia work with that to also feel part of the marriage?
It's so important to say, that the question is that I stop putting their foot down. That's not a marriage. A marriage has to have a shared space where they're both present. The fact that one stepped out and just does everything that the other one wants the spouse to do is not considered a marriage. That's considered a dominating spouse that doesn't allow marriage to take place. Now, of course, the different personalities, we understand it. And again, I fall back to my original opening statement, say I plus I equals I. And we walk into this understanding that after the fact, we understand that one is much predominant than the other. The husband has to realize that there's a dominance, there's a power here. And at this point, we're both in this together. And obviously, I'm not going to become the dominant one. She is a dominant one, no question. If he would only listen, give her the chance to say what she wants to say, have the seichel to react how he's supposed to react, put his point in and say, I fully understand what you want. Let's try to work it this way, the other way, or whatever it should be. As soon as he gives it in a sense where he really feels, he gives her the feeling that he's there to hear what she has to say. I think a lot of the dominance will become minimum. Let me tell you like this, more often than not, that happens if one of the spouses will indeed play dead and leave the room for the dominance of the other. Again, like I say, we talk generically. We're talking in very specifics. One has to be know the case, know what's going on exactly. It's much more subjective than objective. But in objective terms, very generic terms, the dominant spouse will be one where the other one doesn't allow for himself to be there. When they're both there together and they're in that shared space, so although one may be more dominant than the other, but in the shared space, they both have their voices. The shared space where they have time together, they both have their voices. I would suggest that what he does is he makes sacred time once a week, to go out together, or they spend time together and just talk to each other, share time with each other, allow them both to have their voices heard. So although she may be more dominant, more pushy, more aggressive than he is, but there's voices heard. Each one has a chance to hear the other one's existence. And the woman too should be made aware of the fact that in a marriage, it's a two-way street. Or better yet, it's I plus I equals I. Two-way street is too separated. That's too much of an idolis and ifradis. It's better to say that it's an I plus I equals I. So although between this one body, so to speak, you may be the more dominant force, we're both in it together. There's a oneness over here. But to stop putting my foot down and let her dominate, that doesn't say much about the marriage, but it doesn't challenge the marriage. That isn't considered a marriage at all.
Wow. Okay, somebody wrote a very personal question. If Rosh wants to answer it, it's up to you. Basically, we'll globalize it, but it's an important question. Basically, somebody went through a very tough matzav in their life, and they're getting over some addictions that they're going through. We could even globalize it. Somebody's getting through a very tough matzav. The marriage is obviously very stagnant, and it's basically on the last thing, and they're trying to pull together. Is any divrei chizik Rosh you can give to somebody who's trying to get out of such a terrible addictive matzav?
It's a problem. It's a real problem. So let me say it like this. Very often you find situations where the spouse, that's the healthy one between the two, still very fiercely loves, and is a very still re'im ahuvim yachas still exists between the two of them, very strongly, and is more broken with the fact that the spouse is, so to speak, disappointed him or her and gone through this matzav, or has become addicted to whatever it may be, or whatever matzav it may be globally. That's usually the case. Now, obviously, this is very subjective. And it has to be, we need a therapist for this. We need people that know what they're talking about. And me, as a rabbi from the outside, giving days, obviously, could only be counterproductive. But with that caveat in mind, I say as follows. Sometimes, if the spouse needs that chizuk, and there's a gish of I plus I equals I, which tells us we're both in this rut together. Let's see if you both get out of this rut together. There have been marriages that have been saved because of the chizuk and the strength that one spouse has had when the second spouse was rushed down in the dumps. But the second spouse said, I believe in you, I really feel you can do it, and constantly pushed and pushed and pushed and saved the marriage. Those things happen. Are they rare? Probably. Sometimes it's very difficult. One of the two is damaged beyond what's called perceivable, the fixing. It's very difficult. At that point, Achmanu was done again. We can't speak the Kolin. It's hard to say. But the chizuk I could say is that sometimes, in a very, very healthy way, with the chizuk, with the help of others, one spouse can indeed be there in the trenches with the other spouse and really pick that individual out of the ground, out of the dumps, and really put that person back on his or her feet. It's doable. I know such cases and it's doable. Like I say, not very often, but it's doable, and it can be done. So as long as there's still that feeling, the time that it's severed to the point where the I plus I model has been broken completely. Totally, if you say no trust, but a breach of all trust and confidence have happened, it's something that's very hard to repair.
A few people text this question in different versions. I'm going to ask Rosh Yeshiva. They want to know, they come from a yeshiva, very, very firm background. What is Rosh Yeshiva's feeling in showing physical affection or emotional effectiveness to each other in front of our children?
As I'll say very clearly that it's also there has to be like this. In other words, physical affection in front of the children is something that pashtus should not be done. And again, I say this with caution because there are other people different opinions. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with the fact that there's a very comfortable discussion, comfortable banter between the spouses in a way which shows clearly that there's an affection between the two of them. That's not a display of physical affection. That's a display of of the fact that it's an emotional, very deep level of emotion between the two spouses. As I said before, the I plus I model is so important. The growth of one is the growth of the other. And the constant growth puts the two of them together on a deeper level. And it's a constant deeper level. Marriages don't become stagnant unless there's no concept of the fact that we're growing. As growth takes place in each one of us, there's a deeper level of relationship because it's a growth. I've grown, my spouse has grown. Because of that growth, we relate now on a different level. And it's a different relationship which is displayed on a different level. Obviously, it's very hard to put this into words. I will tell you as follows. My parents, many years, I've already been around children, obviously. Couples that were going through struggling times would come for Shabbos to my parents' home just to see what Sholom Bayis looks like. An unbelievable thing. Sholom Bayis, to see my parents, you're talking about the 70s and the 80s, so the relationship was such, the banter, the talk, back and forth, even to a degree check music with each other with banter, which was so, was a breath of fresh air. They couldn't believe it's like a Shana couple after 70, 80 years of being together. So it's something which it's natural, it's normal, it's healthy. There's nothing wrong with that kind of comfort between the spouses. The children should see that. Should see the fact that we have over here, the give and take between the spouses is healthy. It's mutual. It's mutual respect. There's a feeling of each for each other and to each other. But physical, no.
Maybe there's a question that came in here. I just got married and I don't feel any connection. I don't know who to talk to. I'm happy to be sending in the question here. I feel stuck. What can I do?
It doesn't sound like a very good match. It's hard to know what went through in the dating process, usually because there was concern in the dating process that you can have someone that just got married and feel no connection to my wife. Now, this is very subjective. The question that you said, as I said in Menachem, was, what can I do? Who do I talk to? In other words, like this. I will tell you as follows. The first thing, and this is Aleph, the person has to have a mentor of sorts. I'm not going to say speak to Rosh Hashiva. I don't know who the Rosh Hashiva is, I can't say that, but you have to speak to someone who knows you well, who could speak to you, who could hear you, and has your best interest in mind. Not only that, but has safety. Again, has the gift of safety. Coming to the wrong person and say, it doesn't sound good, get out. That's not the way it works. Let's say as follows. You dated this young lady, you got married to this young lady. Chazal tells us clearly when a person gets married. There's a commitment. We can't have the jet age of just lack of commitment. You've committed to something. That really means a lot. Commitment means something. You have an achrayus now to make it work. You have an achrayus to make it work. Is it something that, if it's something you feel and your wife does not feel, that's a problem. If the both of you feel, you make sure that you speak to somebody. You have no choice other than to discuss possibly with her, help me with this. You could be vulnerable to the degree where I need your help to make it work. You went through this, you really want this to work. It has to be addressed in a very positive. Again, there's so many variables to this question. It's very difficult to pinpoint something. But first thing is to find the person to talk to that knows you, that cares, and has the seichel to know exactly what shouldn't be said at this matzah. Sometimes the chassan teacher has experience and he knows these kind of things, and he's not even seen it before. And if you feel you've made that yachas with chassan teacher, you go back and speak to him just to discuss this kind of matzah. That's the person you go to. More often than not, a good chassan teacher understands the ins and outs of these things. That's what his job is supposed to be. Can't say his job is, but that's how his job is supposed to be that. But you need to talk to somebody. You can't allow it to fester because it will build resentment. The most destructive thing to the yachas is when there's resentment. That I plus I model cannot be built when you feel that there's absolutely no I there. You feel there's a sense of resentment will set in, that will destroy the marriage completely.
Rosh Hashiva is a question that came up, and it's a very, very, very prominent question in today's situation. The question is, my husband is seriously addicted to his cell phone. I don't feel heard when I'm talking to him. He never puts it down. He's checking it every 2 seconds. We've discussed it so many times. I can't bring it up anymore. What can make him see and hear me put down his cell phone? Sorry, I'm on the phone. Sorry.
It's such a difficult question. I'm aware of this problem. Unfortunately, time and again, I've seen this problem, heard this problem, and it's a real problem. Sometimes I tell the wife, what you should do is keep on texting him. I'm here. Check in. I want to speak to you. And just constantly bombard him with texts. But I'm not sure that's more tongue in cheek than anything else. It's very difficult. He needs talking to because that's not a relationship. Unfortunately, the appendage called a phone has taken over many lives. It really has. I know enough relationships that have been really threatened because of the phone. Really threatened because of the phone. There is an addiction. There's nothing, you've used the right term, Rabbi Sholom. It's called an addiction. That's called an addiction. The phone is usage as an addiction. And let me give you the underlying Nikud of what it's built on, and maybe that will give you a little bit of a Pesach. The insecurity of people today is such that they need their phones. Let me explain. Everything's based on likes and dislikes. I'm looking at my phone all the time, saying, who responded to me? We send a text just for the response. It's an unbelievable lack of security that if I'm not responded to, if I'm not spoken to through my phone, I don't exist. It's really sad. The person begins to understand that the phone cannot define who he is. He may put it down. He really may put it down. And these guys Shabbos find it very hard to function because they're so jittery with withdrawals for the 26 hours of Shabbos. It's really difficult. But it's so important. Once one understands, and I think that if he understands as a husband, he realizes that the reason you need the phone so much because you have no sense of self. You've lost your total sense of self. Let me as your wife help you reattain and regain your sense of self. Let me as your wife be there for you and make you feel that you have some value besides the fact you're looking for your texts and emails and everything coming through on your WhatsApp to allow you to feel you exist. It's a terrible thing. There's not much I can say besides the fact that I think that she needs help. It's not a good way. It's not a good direction. You have people, families sitting over, all of them sitting around the table, looking at their phones. Oh, it's like an amazing thing. There is no communication. The people in the secular world realize this, and there are people that actually understand this sakana that's inherent in the phone phenomenon, how it's broken down communications. But it's a real problem. I feel she should get it addressed. I feel that she should somehow or another get it to understand that there gotta be hours where the phone isn't there. It's just not working.
Let's take a live question. You're on.
Go ahead.
Shalom, Rabbi. Many people suggest that couples should often take vacations or like Rabbi mentioned before, go on a walk or have spend time periodically together. I just wanted to know if that would be referring to a day or two here and there, or even like vacations for like a week, which would involve leaving children at home and stuff like that. I'm sure there's it's subjective also, but just in general, should people try to avoid going away for so long without children, or if that's what the couple needs, so then that should be done?
The latter of the two statements is probably it. No, this is probably very subjective, meaning that the couple needs that time really alone. At times there's a lot of stress. And I know Baruch Yalod, a lot of children in the house, and because of the children, there was no way in the world of having to find time together. And even that short walk outside when the kids are finally in bed, let's take a walk around the block and just talk to each other. The tension of the fact that the house is still there and it's still, so to speak, it's still lovely, is something which will challenge a couple. I would say it's to go often on longer term vacations with the children, on the cost of the children, thus fish. The vacation for the vacation, tachlis of just leave the kids behind, it's got to be, it needs a certain sense of safety. It needs a certain amount of figuring out how much we should or shouldn't do it. But if there at any time necessary for the couple to re-engage, to re-meet, to reconnect, and with all the stress, the vicissitudes of life, the challenges of life to be minimized, and the kids behind, so be it. There's no question when it's necessary, it's necessary. And I would tell that couple that when you go on vacation, make sure that the cell phone stays home.
Okay, I want to answer Shiva this question. A few different forms came in, but it's a very general question. My husband and I have very different forms of chinuch. My husband says oh, it's not a big deal. Let it go. It's not going to go. The kid came home late, did this, whatever it is. You know what I mean? I get very frustrated. I'm very uptight. What can we do to get on the same page, not to make a big deal out of every little thing that comes up? In general, one second, another question. In general, when one spouse feels one way about something and the other one feels the other way, who has the final say? Is he will game for fleischiks? He wants milchiks. What do we do? Tariff?
There's so many jokes that come to this question. I won't even start with them. So we'll leave the jokes unsaid. Here's the thing. It starts with mutual respect. I said that we have to respect each other in totality. I respect your opinion. It means something means a lot to me. And you respect mine means a lot to me. There are times when we come to an impasse. We come to a point where we can't come to a common denominator. The Chiyah Gavne, it's Kedai. Not in each given situation, but it's Kedai to have an outside Rav, an outside mentor that the both of you respect highly. And you're ready to accept that day, whether it's the other spouse or not. Remember, because it's I plus I plus I, this is not about Avas HaNitzruach. You're not here to win the battle. You're not here to make your point. You're not here to prove anything. You're here for the best of your children in the question of Chinuch. You're here for the best of the home, for whatever the home is supposed to have. At times, where there are differing opinions, with mutual respect, we understand one thing very powerful, which is be sure to have an outside voice, one that you can both listen to and accept. Both listen to and accept. You have to have that machir. If it's going to be things which are really fundamental, for example, although you got married, there's so many things you share in common. Obviously, there actually common goals, but there will be differences. This is a perfect example. The husband is more or less a fear when it comes to the chinuch of his kids. The wife is upside down. There's no shine that he has to. Well, here in this case, I would actually say, I give you my opinion. Again, I can't say this because it's a subjective question. I can tell you that overall, the derech klal, when it comes to that, you should trust his wife. There's a certain amount that she has a siyat b'shmayim in these things. But it's kedai to have an outside party, the third day, which will indeed be the machriya to allow for the two of you, when you come to something which is a difference, a strong difference in chinuch, whatever it may be, to be kevei. And both started by Mekabel that day. We will have differences of opinion, even though it's I plus I equals I. We do have differences, obviously. So as much as we're in this together in a very strong way, but there are differences that exist. We need someone else who can help us make those decisions, obviously.
Okay, there's another communication question that came in. We're officially happily married for 3 years, but my spouse always complains that I hold back information and I don't share everything. That is actually true, but do I have to share everything with my spouse?
I would say like this. You don't have to share everything with your spouse, but you do have to have a seichel to understand that she does know you're not sharing everything with her. Because if you can't prevent the fact that she knows you're not sharing information with her, you better be sure to share everything with her. Because that you don't want. Let me explain something. It's so important. A relationship is built on one yesod. It's called trust. Trust is so important. So important. There's any nekuda of lack of trust in the relationship, is broken. There is no relationship. A husband and wife, where the husband knows every given moment what the wife is doing, and the wife knows every given moment what the husband is doing, what he's all about, every given moment, that's not a relationship. It's not built on trust. It's because I trust you for who you are, and you trust me for who I am, that there's a relationship. Wherever you are, I'm there as well. The Vilna going to something fascinating. The Vilna says a concept called Krisas Bris. Kadosh Baruch Hu's Krias Bris in Yisrael. Says the going that's talking about Torah Kadosh, it's called Krisas Bris. Says the going, what's the word? Krisas Bris, cutting a deal, cutting a bris. What does that mean? There are many different shot. The going says as follows. The true bris is as follows. I take a piece of myself and I give it to you. That means wherever you are, I'm there with you. You take a piece of yourself and give it to me. Wherever I am, you're there with me. That's Krisas Bris. Says the guy, he gave us the Resena Akdosha. So to speak, a piece of himself. Wherever we are, we're walking with a piece of Torah Akdosha. That's called a relationship. Wherever you are, I'm there as well. Wherever I am, you're there with me. We're there together. If you have this kind of yachas where there's a lack of trust, you're hiding something from me. And indeed, he says he is hiding something from her. That's called a breach in trust. That's something which puts a relationship in jeopardy. It's not kedai. You're not mechuyev to say everything, but you are mechuyev to indicate that you said everything. Your arm you can make sure that she understands she trusts you. Does it mean you have to say everything that went on? Of course not. But when you do have a sense of sharing, or she feels the things that you're not sharing, and you're holding things back clearly so, that's a chesed in trust. That shouldn't be done.
Okay, shkoyach. Let's go. We have another live question. Let's go. Shalom Aleichem.
Hey, thank you so much. So I have a child who's dating seriously and went out 8 times at this point from, I guess, a yeshivish background, but maybe not spitz yeshivish, but definitely yeshivish. He appreciates the girl's milos tremendously, but he doesn't feel like a bachur might typically feel before getting engaged. And sometimes people say, well, maybe it's a logical person, not such an emotional person, but he has liked girls in the past. Perhaps they said no to him or they weren't suitable for other reasons. So it's not that he has never felt like he liked someone more. And he's just trying to like her to the point that he should get engaged. But now we have this Das Torah question. There are those who say you don't need feelings, but again, it's a little bit worrisome. Like, can you just get engaged just seeing milos in a person without feeling like your typical, like the typical chassan or kala might feel?
Well, let me tell you like this. I get this question dozens upon dozens upon dozens of times. And it very often depends on the nature of the individual. Although in the previous dates he has felt a certain sense of emotion that he may not feel here, let me tell you as follows. I tell the Bachram 3 things they need for the dating process. Number 1, there is nothing there that bothers him. No turn off, no look, no mannerism, no way of talking, no point of turn off. The girl can be gewaldig in all minds, but there's something which bothers him, irks him, it annoys him. Achmana l'stan, it's not kedai, because there will be tensions in the marriage. Those tensions are such that that nekuda will rear its ugly head. It's not kedai. That's on the Genan go. Now, question number 1: is there nothing there that bothers him? No nekuda, no mannerism, no way of look, no way, whatever it should be that bothers him. So once we square that away completely, and he's seen it. Now I say there's 2 more nekudas. And like I said before, mutual respect. You respect her, she respects him. You don't have to be the same. She can be doing things totally that don't interest him. Or he can do things that don't interest her, but does do respect her. Does she respect him? In other words, if he sees that she's not smart, it bothers him. But something he doesn't respect for that. It bothers him, it doesn't respect. But it's a mutual respect. And finally, the 3rd point is common goals. Common goals, what do we want out of life? What are we overall looking for in life? Obviously, life can take us all kinds of places. It's hills and its valleys. But what do we overall want out of life? That's all we need. Now, I fully understand the concern as a parent. I don't see my son excited. I don't see his palpitations of the heart. Chazon Ish used to say that the feelings that one has is called shluchah derachman. It's a special gift. Not everyone feels those feelings. And very often, when he's there and he feels it, there's a growth. We're not looking for anything which is called romantic feelings. That thing is that's bluff. It could be there. It's fine, but that's not what marriage is built on. As I said before, marriage is built on building a relationship, forging a relationship. Very often, boy like this, when he commits himself, there's nothing wrong. It's all in place. Really nothing wrong. So at that point, if he has, we could say he likes her. He just doesn't feel excited. If he doesn't have any feeling whatsoever, that's problematic. That's problematic. If he's had feelings in the past, feels nothing at all. He likes it, but it just doesn't have the typical chassid feeling of the fact that it's so important. All these things that's obviously something which is sufficient. If he likes her and everything's in place, that is sufficient to say he can commit himself. And more often than not, we would say it's something which indicates he'll become more excited, much more excited when he reaches the point of commitment. Commitment in and of itself breeds the excitement, and it grows. The asiyas sholem b'bayim is something which comes with the time. We grow with this together. We develop a relationship. It's not silly. It's not frivolous. It's not it's not laughy type. It's much more serious and much more, if you will, less emotional. But it could be there nonetheless. Usually 8 times, and there's nothing there at all that bothers him. You can't point to any included that bothers me. That should be sufficient for him to commit. And again, I don't know the circumstance, but in general, broader terms, that's something which should be enough for him to commit.
Okay, that's Rashiva. Rashiva could answer such a question. It's a very never got such a question, but I think it's a very powerful question.
Go ahead.
Again, next week we're having a share. Got this point about next week's share. We're having a share next week on people that lost people, grief and loss, and there are a lot of people that lost a tremendous, those tremendous amount of people that were nifted the past, tkufa. And can you ask the Rosh Hashiva if a relationship lives on after a spouse is nifter? She says, basically, I feel like I still love my previous spouse. We had a beautiful marriage and he was nifter. But on the other hand, I feel like I'm missing out the beauty of a relationship right now. How do I balance both of those?
Great question. Again, I dealt with this extensively in different, all kinds of circumstances you really have. And it's difficult, and again, more often than not, I like to empathize with an individual. There's an amazing soul connection between spouses, no question about it. Chazal tell us, and it's discussed in the Goïnim, talking about the person was once married a second time. Who does the person go back to after Tchias HaMesim? It's the question asked, where Chazal tells us goes back to the first spouse. Obviously, there's a relationship there which is so powerful. It's an neshama relationship. Now, because relationships between husband and wife is a bria chadosha, as we said before, yotzer adam yitzir chadosha, that gives us a little bit of a hint and understanding that the yitzir chadosha is a soul relationship. So when one is not there, it's a piece of self. But there was a hashlam. It's that one body. Imagine the plag gufa being buried in the ground, the other half over here. It's an extremely difficult thing. However, yes, indeed, it's true. Tav l'meisiv tandu l'meisiv armalu. It's something called Chazal tell us about the fact that there's a need for a woman to have a relationship. And it's called a zivug sheni. There's such a thing as a zivug sheni. Chazal speak about the fact that there are Harvard's bonito. Chazal do talk about the fact that it's a mixed bag. Indeed, the zivug sheni has that mixed bag where there is a relationship forged, but it remains a zivug sheni. And it has all kinds of, the nature of it is different. There's no question about that. And when there's a commitment to a second husband, it has to be a total commitment to a second husband, but it doesn't take away the fact that there's something about the first one. I've spoken to women that when they lost their husbands, they always swore up and down they'll never get married again. And Baruch Hashem, a few years later, they have to be married. It's not easy at all. And again, I could only emphasize, but after a certain amount of time, sometimes the feeling, what one should say is that the husband says, I don't need to be unhappy. So to speak, the husband from Shemayim tells her a message, for my sake, please get married. I want you to be happier. And I understand in this matzah, that's what the Torah tells us to do. You have to be in that matzah. I'd rather have you happy than unhappy. There's a certain way we're clearing away that feeling of you somehow or another being treacherous to the first relationship. But it's very subjective.
Okay, hold on one second, Rashi. I'm just gonna jump to the question. Let's look at that long one. Questions like this. Basically, somebody's in a marriage and they don't have any kids. And the question is, their marriage is not going so well, and they're married for 10 years without kids. The question they want to know is the problem in the marriage is because they don't have kids because they have tsaros, or they first work on that, or maybe it's the marriage itself without the infertility.
Very hard to answer that question without knowing the facts. Obviously, that's totally subjective. I will say that not having children makes it difficult. If Rahmanu L'Islam, one of the two spouses has a problem and it's clearly defined, so after a long time, it's Chalila could develop a certain sense of animosity. A good marriage will work together and be mechazik together, really be mechazik each other in the best of ways, and look for other things, other ways of trying to make the marriage build and have the simcha should have when it would be Brucha Yelodi. At the same time, if there is Nekuda that will indeed be some kind of Nekuda of Chasar in the marriage, something that needs to be worked on, not having children will exacerbate the situation. So to answer the question, with a definitive way of saying it's X or Y, it's impossible for me to do. But I will acquiesce to the fact, I'll be acquiescing to the fact that it's possible that not having children there would be indeed something which could exacerbate the pre-existing condition between the two of them. A good marriage, a solid marriage, should keep them both very much mechuzik, doing what they're supposed to be doing, being mechazik each other in the best of ways, and going through the Torah together. If there's a mutual decision to part ways and to see they get married, to have children, that's the mission.
Before we continue, Baruch Hashem, we're getting a lot of information, a lot of ideas, but I have this feeling that there are people sitting out there and wondering what should they do when the relationship is a shtickle broken, the trust was broken, or they feel they're in a schwache matzav. Where in ganzen zerbrochen, where do they start? What's either it could be chizik or something practical where they can take steps to start rebuilding the trust.
I think that we said enough information this evening that so give some information to think about. If I view my marriage as an I plus I equals I marriage, and that's the formula that makes it, that goes very far in reassessing, reevaluating, what did I do here? What was my gisha to this marriage? What did I come in this for? Did I come in this to take or did I come in this to give? Did I come to this the fact that I want to be served hand and foot, or to come to be makatoiv, the fact that my spouse does so much for me? That's the first overall gisha. Next thing, and again, we talk in very broad terms. Obviously, every situation has to be understood. Do I want this marriage to last? There's so many minus my wife has, but it's so difficult. Or there's so many minus my husband has, it's so difficult. How do I fix this? How do I do it? Do I want it to go? There has to be, besides what the marriage is, I have to have the cheshik, I have to have the drive to try to work on it and try my best to resurrect it to save it. Thirdly, then at that point I can speak to an outsider. An outsider does not have to be a therapist. An outsider has to be another bardas that's willing to hear everything I have to say, look at everything that the other person has to say, and pull it all together. Pull it all together. I could say like this. I've been involved in Sholom Bayis. I know very many times it's not ended well. But the few times that Baruch Hashem it ended well, after going to something which I felt had no chance, it ended well. There's simcha. I was exhilarated. There's simcha I had. That Baruch Hashem, this marriage is pushing. Look what I did. I saved him. They're brief of the end of it. And it took work. It took so much work. I had to hear out every side, then validate every side, and hear every side exactly what the nekudas were. This was an alpha male. This was whatever the nekudas were, but to figure out where the two of them could actually bond, and it's work and can be done. It can be done when a person has the time, the wherewithal, the seichel to make it happen. So there's no such thing. If you've gone this far, where you've dated, you've met, you've married, you've committed. A commitment is something that has to be taken seriously. It's not something you get in, you get out. It's a commitment. It's not in and out. There's a lot of gisha to that. We can't approach that way. Marriage is something which is a real commitment. It's a binyan. And it's supposed to be a binyan adayat, like the Bracha says. And unfortunately, it has its problems. Indeed, the Torah gives us the eitzah. There is an eitzah because of get pieces. There is an eitzah time when it comes to that. But it's a commitment that it needs to be worked on. In other words, it means don't have an immediate resigned attitude. This thing is doomed. It can be saved, but it doesn't have to be heard. Change your approach to what it is that you're trying to work on. Try to see the mileage, count the blessings, see all the silver linings in those difficult moments, and understand there's so much more. That's how you know the nekuda. I tell my Simon very often, I tell him about the Kala. I tell him about the Kala, I say the Kala never forgets anything. I say, how I know? It's not because of her memory. It's because that's the nature of a woman. The nature of a woman is called the consolidated. A man is called an initiating. Consolidated, everything is incorporated, everything is involved, everything is swallowed, everything comes into her picture. So the care has to be taken that any word you say to her which is negative, is incorporated into her very being. A chavrusa, you can say, that's a silly svara. You can move out with a svara. To a wife, you can't say that's a silly svara, because it becomes part of who she is. The care has to be taken that one addresses his wife. Never put down, never be courteous, never with inviting hurtful comment. It stays, it's incorporated, it becomes more or less what that individual is. It's so important. Having said that, anytime you feel animosity or something, your wife did something egregious, unacceptable, really, she has no parents. Think as follows. The woman is global. She's global. There's so much more to this marriage than this moment. This moment may be something, she did something wrong. But in the overall picture, don't you have much more for than this little nice thing? You want to really win the battle, lose the war? Don't think that way. Think globally. Think the way Nisha thinks. There's a global yachas here. It's so not kedai to put all of it in jeopardy just for one moment of nitzachim to prove your point. Once your gisha is into so much more, look at the global picture, you appreciate the person, you appreciate the picture, your gisha changes, and it becomes so much better. This is, of course, the question of the male to the female, the ish to the isha. It's true both ways, obviously. Let's look at this globally. Is this something which we can work out globally and appreciate each other in spite of this, this bickering and these silly petty things? If you get that to the side and begin to appreciate each other in a global way, therefore it changes our attitude, makes it so much easier. But of course, the first thing you do is if you feel you can't do it yourself, speak to a competent person, a competent coach, a competent therapist, a competent drug, but someone who can really get into the essence of what each individual says, is, lives, and finally work on the two. If you see compatibility, go for it.
Okay, we're getting tons of very powerful questions now, so let's jump into this one. This is a chizik question.
Go ahead.
I'm married for almost 25 years to a man that has anger and anxiety issues that only became apparent after our wedding. We have been through therapy, but to no change. I'm not looking for a divorce, although I've been told to. I believe my kids would be destroyed. I'm looking for chizik to stay in an extremely difficult marriage for the sake of my kids. No physical abuse, but definitely a lot of emotional abuse.
First step, the first thing I empathize. I empathize with the person, what she's going through. Very difficult to imagine what she's going through. 25 years that she found out after the marriage something, and she lasted 25 years. Hats off to her. There's no shy that she deserves a medal for that. And she's doing it for the sake of the family, which is an amazing thing. That is backwards is only to find it in a shame show. That's number one. Having said that, as much as possible, again, therapy is therapy, and obviously she's tried and not much has changed. There are such personalities and all kinds of things that are described and given today, all kinds of appellations, all kinds of letters, all kinds of things. And obviously, these things do exist. The mental health is mental health. At this point, it's very little to say besides the fact that she should be lauded. The children should understand when they grow up and appreciate exactly what she went through for them. Her life, the focus of her life, in spite of the fact that marriage being this one formula, the two together, obviously, the focus of her life at this point is what she put her life out for, which is her family, her children. She almost finds solace in the children. The fact that she'll be minded very Sholom Kaminetsky. What she should probably do is focus and see to it that her children do not mimic the behavior. Try her best to be sure that her children are indeed healthy, that they have wonderful and healthy marriages. I think that there's nothing much more to say. To say what she did is an amazing thing. It's an amazing feat. To be able to that last in such a life is an amazing thing. Really amazing thing. I don't know the circumstance, I can't suggest what she should do to try her best, even at this point, to try to change her husband's ways. If it's something which we call a disorder of sorts, there isn't much one can do, obviously. But at the same time,
Okay, let's go to the next question over somebody text. Also a very, very, very powerful question, but let's globalize it because my husband has a bad relationship with my father. I feel stuck in the middle. So basically anybody who has the shviga, the shver, the spouse is in the middle. What can I do when this affects our shalom bias?
Let me tell you something interesting. I've been involved in a lot of such cases, unfortunately. I can tell you as follows, that when one spouse, it goes a little bit, not yet this case, but I'm going to be marked with this included. When a spouse personally has a bad relationship with his or her parents, the respective spouse may not in any way belittle that parent. That is to say, if one's shlitter doesn't get along with his wife, the two of them have bad yachas, and the wife is really always saying how bad her mother is to herself. The husband cannot say bad things about his wife's mother, because the mice say it's his wife's mother. It says a familial relationship should not be done. You should be there to be mechazik, to strengthen the yachas, to say, I really understand you, it's so hard for you, it's so difficult for you, but never add fuel to the fire. That's the stop point. Now you're describing a situation where he doesn't get along with the wife's husband, the wife's father, I'm sorry. First thing, he needs help. He should learn to get along with people, especially Shlit. It's a terrible thing not to get along with Shlit. But the worst part of that is that you say she's caught in the middle. What is she supposed to do? Obviously, what she has to do is support her husband. There's no question. She has to support her husband. But in no way will she besmirch her father. She just can't do that. It's her father. He can't expect her to go against her father. She has to be supportive to the husband, but to join in his vendetta or spite that he has to his share, chas v'shalom. In this yachas, he has to be made aware of the fact that he cannot get her in any which way to go against her parents. It's a worse situation because he doesn't get along with her father. He expects her to do the same and take his side, and that's fine. Now again, talking about a father that's a tyrant and clearly in the wrong, and that's been decided by outsiders, not insiders, but outsiders that know the situation really well, know both sides of the story. You can say, like, this, he's totally inappropriate. He's going after his son-in-law in a terrible way, terrible attitude. So at that point, there has to be a certain amount of disengaging. It's so not kedai to have a relationship which is a fight. It doesn't help anybody. No one ever wins. There's a certain amount of disengaging. And that disengaging has to allow for his wife to have the yachas with her father. Again, this is global terms. Everything has its own specifics. So I can't say this, on specifics, but globally, to allow her to have the yachas with her father, and as much as he can't get along with shver, disengage, pull away. Be supportive to your wife. It's your father. Be there for him, and everything else. As long as it's not the cost, obviously, of her shalom bayis. But she has to, nonetheless, like I said before, her husband comes first. She has a chiyuv to her husband, although she had a chiyuv previously to her father. At this point, the chiyuv is to her husband. I will mention that in those nine.
Very good. Here's another interesting. My husband gets up at 11 and does nothing most of the day. My kids complain, why should they have to get up, go to school, shul? I basically feel my life is over. All I wanted to build a family for Kvod Shemayim, Hashem should see nachas for my kids, and this is what's happening. What can I do?
The husband obviously needs help. If he's not functional, he needs help. The first thing you can do is get the help the husband needs to get. Do everything you can to help him. At this point, don't belittle him, don't besmirch him, don't look down at him. He's a broken man. And at this point, he doesn't have the wherewithal to function. Start with the fact you build him up. Give him back his self. Give him back a sense of self. Do everything you can to give him back a sense of self. Eventually, you'll get him out of that funk. At this point, he's in a rut. It's not even a good Nazi. So the first thing you have to do is work on the problem. Not dismiss the problem, not wring your hands in frustration because of the problem. Address the problem. Now, obviously, in this kind of function, he gets up 11 o'clock, he does nothing, he just lays around, it'll destroy the very fabric of the home. The home can function this way. No question. So the urgency is there. The urgency of making sure that he fixes the problem, pulls it together, makes sure that it happens. It's very, very urgent. She can't raise the home. She shouldn't be frustrated because I hope it's over. Let's not call it over. Let's give it a chance and see if that's what we can do over here. If there's anybody in the world that the husband respects, she should bring him into the picture. She try her best to get the kind of help. She can't do it herself, obviously. He won't go for help. He won't go. I don't know exactly the situation, how long he's been in this Nazi, but he needs the help. He needs the support. You can't look at him dismissively. You really can't. You've married him. You've got a family with him. It's one and the same. It's that same eye plus eye plus eye. At this point, part of you is not doing well. You need to see your merap with the other part of yourself. Do anything you can to bring it back. You'll be surprised once you have that attitude, positive attitude, an attitude that maybe he's fixable. If you do something with him, things might change. He may be in bed simply because you feel he can't be. You may be dismissing him, and that's why he's in bed. It's hard to know what comes first, the horse or the car.
Okay, we have so many more questions. Is there any time limit?
Yeah, you're fine. Go ahead.
Taking chatzos, everything. Okay. Okay, let's put on the next person. You're on.
Am I on?
Yeah, you're on.
Hi, my name is Shlomi Weber. I have a question. And I'm asking that question and because I'm involved in a lot of these kind of cases. What do you do when you do have a couple where the wife or the husband has pictured themselves a certain image of how they want their spouse to be, and what ends up being that they're not exactly the way they're supposed to be? Yeah, we know we always tell parents, don't get involved, don't get involved. But then there is this one parent that does get involved, and they cause a lot of problems. It's a very common thing nowadays. And I see that time and again and again and again. What kind of chizuk do you give a couple like that? And what would you tell those parents how to kind of, either for the parents to kind of not get involved, and for the couple, once one parent gets involved, how do they deal with that?
You said, I have two parts to your question. The first thing you said is that people have certain images and fantasies in their minds about how the spouse should be. Point one, and then point two, which is another point. I'm not sure how it's related to the second point, when parents begin meddling in a difficult shalom bayis situation. So the 2 points. Understand you right?
Yeah. So for an example, a case that I was working on recently where this young man got married and he had no intentions of going to kollel. He was planning to get a job right after they got married, and this girl somehow had imagined herself to get a husband who was going to sit in kollel for at least 6 months to a year or so. And all of a sudden, a week after they got married, the husband is saying that he's looking for a job. And here she's like, whoa. And then the shver is like, excuse me, I was told that you're going to sit in kollel. So, and then now this young man is stuck between wanting to get a job and starting his life, his career, and whatever. And his shver is standing on his head and saying, I was told by the shadchan that you're not going to go to work right away. And this is causing a chaos between.
So now I understand. In other words, I hear the case very clearly. The two things do come together. Again, did he sell a bill of goods? He sold himself as being a single man who's going to live for 6 months to a year before he got married? Or that was a perception which was never really sold by him? Or that was the captain's job?
He didn't sell himself. It's basically, he was sold.
He was sold. It's not Bishmak, but Al Capone, actually, unfortunately, that's not a Gishmak Shtigl. Let me tell you like this. In such a matter, they should find the pshara. That is to say, like this. You say, I feel badly for you. You were sold, which wasn't true. You didn't want this b'chlal. But this is what your wife wants at this point. Is it worth it for you to start your foot on something which is such animosity? I tell people, interestingly enough, I've met modern couples, people that had no chance to learning at all. They told me, something. If you can, spend your first year in kollel and Eretz Yisrael. I've been working before I got married. Kollel and Eretz Yisrael, that's the furthest thing from his mind. I said, there's nothing like starting your first year of marriage in the pristine setting of a medrash. You want to start your first year of marriage sitting in an office in Manhattan? Is that what you really want to do? You want your marriage want to look like based on such studies. A person like that just say, I understand you want to start your life, you want to start your career. I fully understand, appreciate that. But let's do this. Say, your shver and your wife both expected you to be sitting and learning for a year, please. Let's find a pshara. Give yourself at least a 3 to 4 month period sitting in a place in a base medrash. Try your best to do it. You know something, you never know. You may like it. If it works well, don't waste your time. I'm not talking coffee and kollel. Talking the real deal. Go for just for 4 to 6 months. Just put it down. I understood it's not fair to you. You didn't expect that. People lied about what you're planning to do. But there's need to make it shorter here. The meddling is not going to be helpful. It may destroy the marriage. The couple liked each other, but she had expectations of going to learn, and he had no such stud in the chlam. It's zichar kedai to save the marriage. Everything else being equal, marriage is a great marriage. Why destroy it based on this misinformation or this misleading of the shadchan's job? It's such a thing. I would look for a pshara. I look for a pshara. I speak to the young man. If the young man is obstinate, says, I want to go. I want my career first. At that point, the derech klal, she'll go along with that. It's a bracha, and he has to understand that it's not worth his while. He's starting a marriage based on something which was really something which she was broken about. She'll never live down the fact that the first 6 months of her life she expected to be sitting at a medrash, learning Sfarim, and doing what he's supposed to be doing. Instead, he's running around an office, hustling and bustling and trying to find sales on Amazon. Something like that, it's just so different between what she wanted and what he is. Why create a basis to your marriage with such such iniquities,
But that's very well said when you have a young man, a bacher that was sitting in yeshiva and learning milechatchila. But if the bacher wasn't sitting, he was just sitting in yeshiva squeezing the bench for 3 years, just to fake it until you make it. That's easier said than done.
Emes, I'm with you. In other words, it's hard for the young man. Very hard for the young man. At this point, now you're applying it for somebody else. You're applying it to his conscience in a sense. She was fooled, Ramais. You're not coming because now it's going to place the it's not going to do it. You do this, but unfortunately, she was fooled. No fault of your own. No fault of your own. But she was fooled. You want to start a marriage with she at this point, unfortunately, has been fooled by who you are. And you'll take this marriage from here on and build it based on the fact that you're pushing, not what you expect it to be. If you're right, I'm appealing to something totally different. Here it's an anoshis, it's not hasmode, it's not talmud chochem, it's not none of the above. It's pasha the anoshis, it's pasha v'lonu chaveir. That's what I'm appealing to. Like I said again, you're right. 3 years from the fetch taban, he didn't do much besides he was a bench warmer. He didn't much to do. It's going to be tough for a guy like that to do it. I can only appeal to him. Do the best you can to allow your wife to feel that she started in a good way.
I have 2 more questions. I at least want to cover these 2, if it's okay.
Sure.
Person, this is his wife, and she comes from such a mishpacha. So he says, should one not be makbid if his wife uses him as a punching bag and talks to him disrespectfully, because that's how she talks when she gets emotional about a situation? Should he let it go if this is the way she does it? This is a very emotional person.
As I said, I plus I, and her chesronis and not his chesronis. Now, that doesn't mean he has to become abused. Chas v'sholom. If he's abused to the point we'll have an animosity built up, he will become enmity, dislike here. It's so not kedai. As much as at this point, he'll be willing to give a punching bag, there's only so much he could take. And at the end, he'll explode. However, from the beginning, if she's an emotional person, at this point, he says, I'm that emotional person. There's not much I can do about it. But he talked to her, said, what can we do about our emotional outbursts? What can we do to change our emotional outbursts? Ours, I say in a sense, I call it a collective ours because it's no longer, it's not you, it's ours. I'm just as concerned about this outburst as you are. We're in this together. What can we do about this? Tell me, what can I do to make it easier for you? What can you do to make it easier for me? That discussion has to take place. In other words, of course, at first, that's definitely Gisha, this is what I got into, this is what I married. But if he's going to become the punching bag, he's going to end up being, and we got a lot of animosity and dislike for the fact that that's what he is. It doesn't bode well for the relationship. No, indeed, there's no reason it should be abused. That's not what we're talking about. But if you can work it in the sense where he gets her to understand how she's reacting, how he perceives it, and what she's doing when she loses herself, that may be possible. If it's something which is a real emotional outburst that goes into the form of mental health, it's a different story.
Okay, so let's do one more question and we'll go to the closing. Should we give a speech at the end? The last question I want to ask for tonight. My husband is very involved in the klal and he does chesed work and devotes a lot of time to helping others. I'm not sure what he does, but I feel there needs to be some boundaries. We need him more at home. Is this selfish? And how would you advise me to go about it?
Really not selfish. He has to be a mensch before he becomes the Aska. Very important. Chaim Vital writes Shai Kedusha that a person is measured in Shamayim how he treated his wife at home, now he treated others outside. It's such a powerful statement. At home, he takes things for granted. At home, he feels he can do anything he wants. At home, he feels he can be disrespectful and that money and do nothing at home. And go out to be the great chesed and the chazlan, the askan agodol. That's a terrible thing. Let's say like this very clearly. The definition of him als mensch is how he treats his wife and his family. Als mensch. Once he's established as a mensch, he can become an askan. An askan is not a mensch at home, but therefore is not mitzliach outside. As much as people know about the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, there are such brias, but the derech it's not mitzliach, and it's more important than anything for him to be a mensch at home. He needs to be home, and it has to be home. She has to be able to appreciate, he has to be able to appreciate the home. He develops who he is as mensch. The more he's chesed, the charity starts at home, the more he's chesed at home, the more he's truly caring and doing it. Instead of being a person who's all over the place outside, it starts at home. Indeed, as well. That's the short answer. Of course, he has to be developed as mensch at home, and he's an askan outside of the house as well. Doesn't work the other way around.
So people are texting, they want to know how they can get a hold of the Rosh Hashiva. To have a question to Rosh Hashiva.
I'm always scared of these, my mothers, because next thing I know, I'm deluged, I'm attacked. I have an email address. You can share them the email address, and again, you shouldn't expect immediate response, but if the direct flow, I get around maybe late 3 hours in the morning. But if it's something specific, and I'll say it right now, my time is very, very, very limited. So, and it's a question and the answer. It's a question of something which will take much more than that, and it's something which will engage me at this point. I literally don't have time. Baruch Hashem, it's yeshiva is 24/7, and then there's things outside of yeshiva which is over 24/7. I try to juggle the both. It's not easy to increase my juggle of 24/7 is going to be digital. I want to finish with one thing. One word you can answer.
I just want to say one thing, Rosh Hashiva. Sorry. We're going to go to closing in a second, so we'll leave that for that. But there's one other question I want to get to. Somebody just texted a very good question.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to tell Rosh Hashiva that you obviously have to come back for another Zoom because there's so many more questions over here, and I don't want to speak more to you, so you have to make more time. So let's do one more question, and then we'll do the closing, and then Rosh Hashiva can wrap it up. 5 more minutes, okay?
Sure.
Okay. It's 2 questions somebody wrote that I think is very, very important to end with this. How can a wife not let other people's opinion of her husband affect her own image or respect for him? That's A. And B, we know how bad it is to compare one spouse to other spouse, but it's very hard sometimes not to. Is there any tip to help prevent one from doing so?
Both good questions, both good questions. You know, when we say in the Birchas Chasana, we say, like the Simcha, we go back and say, that Simcha the Chassan Kala has a Simcha is going back to Gan Eden Mikeden. You know, you don't find the dogesh of the Simcha of Chassan Kala of Adam and Chava. We find that Kodesh Baruch Hu should be, but the dogesh of the Simcha don't find. What is the Simcha that we're referring to every Chassan Kala? Let me tell you what it is. Chazal say, "In Simcha katoras asfeitas." It's a minor chacham. There's no bigger Simcha than katoras asfeitas. When a person is in doubt, he's not happy. When we clarify sfeitas, we have something very, very sure about something. There's no greater Simcha than that. And make it very clear that Adam and Chava had no sfeitas as to who their spouse was supposed to be. Adam and Chava were the only 2 around. Nobody else existed. We benched the Chassan Kala to Samechachu Yitzicha B'Gan Eden Mikeden. Like the Simcha of Adam and Chava as it was before, that's a Simcha here. There has to be a sense that my spouse is all I could have ever wanted to be. And that means he and she are made for each other in exact, that's it. That group echad we keep speaking about is something which has nothing else that could have been matched in this group. And as much as we see other spouses, we see another one that's so successful, so classy, so chesed. One has to think to oneself, had I married that individual, my life would have been total misery because it's a mismatch. It doesn't work with me. My simcha is because my spouse, my husband, my wife is exactly what I need to have. And that's it. That's it. And I revel in that. I love that. With all its shortcomings, with all its pockmarks, with all its boils, no difference. It is exactly what I needed for my Hashem. I can't speak about being someone else's body. I can't be somebody else. I can only be myself. I can't be anything else besides myself. That's what I appreciate. That's exactly what it is. That's all it is. No, that's the thing that's going to make me be who I'm supposed to be. Once that happens, I really don't care about what someone else thinks about. It's not pleasant if someone besmirches my spouse. I'll be defensive. I'll take it very personally, obviously. Or when I compare my spouse, I compare my husband to somebody else whose husband seems to be so flashy, so successful. Let me think in terms, but my husband is me. That's my hatzlacha. That's what makes me who I am. That's what I'm about. I want to be at the best of myself. I don't need anybody else besides myself. If I kick myself for not being me, then obviously I'm not in a good state. If I'm happy with who I am, and it starts all from there, my self-confidence is there, and my self-image is there. I know exactly what I'm about. My spouse is part of that picture. How could I compare myself to anybody else? Kodesh Baruch Hu blessed me with my blessings. He gave me all the good things that I gave. That's what he wanted from me. And because of that, it's an unbelievable thing. I became the best I'm supposed to be. At Khan, nothing else. Then it's much easier.
I told Rosh Shiva, we had Rabashkin on one of the shiurim, and he said the shtickle word like this. So I told Rosh Shiva, you probably have enough of it. He said when he was in jail, he used to get so many letters because everybody was writing him letters. And he said there was once a guy in jail one of the guys over there, they kept on screaming at him, "You're stealing all the mail," because he's getting so much. Obviously, he's stealing everybody else's mail. So he said, "I don't know what he's talking about. It says my name on it." He said, "But you're still stealing the mail." So he said, "You know something? You take it, you open it, and you want it, you could have it." He gives him the envelope. The guy opens it up, and it's written in Yiddish, in Hebrew, whatever. The guy can't read it. He says, "That's exactly the Levin. It's addressed to me. My spouse is addressed to me. It's not to you. It's no shaykhs to you." It was a thief of art. Okay, let's go to closing. So we'll say a closing right, and then the Rosh Yeshiva can leave the oil off with some chizik. So again, first I want to gracious Rabbi Sholom Kamenetsky, Rosh Yeshiva Philadelphia, coming on tonight, being mechazik the oil. I hope the oil got a tremendous amount of chizik. A lot of more questions are coming in. So, Hashem, anybody else more questions, please email it. We'll forward to Rosh Yeshiva. If he has time, we can answer it. We'll come back again, be mechazik the oil. And I want to say thank you again for coming. Again, every Sunday night the shir is at 10 o'clock. It's the same shir time. Rosh Yeshiva, what do you think? Such a big oil comes every Sunday night to be mechazik? It's murder, no?
Amazing, really amazing.
Amazing. Next week, Menachem 5-2, we're going to have a shir from therapist Glenn Holman. He's a very chashuv yid. There's a whole story behind him. He actually opened an organization. We're going to be talking about grief and loss for people that, for everybody. Everybody has some type of grief and loss in their life. He's personally had his own losses, and we're talking about people that were nifter, people that, have sicknesses, and also everybody has some type of loss. It's, again, I advise you to bring your tissues. It's going to be a very heartsick azach, and if you know anybody that lost somebody, should definitely, and still grieving, should definitely tell them to come on. It's going to be a tremendous chizuk. Everything tonight's going to be recorded. It's going to be on Menachem Bernfeld's website, menachemberfeld.com. If anybody has any questions for Menachem, for Coach Menachem, for Rosh Yeshiva, please email coachmenachem@gmail.com. Again, tonight is shir number 52. It's all going to be recorded. If you want to listen to it on the phone, the number is 848-777-GROW, and this is shir number 52. Again, I go to the advertising sponsors, Lakewood Scoop, Rabbi and Nif from Chazak, and Chayla Kalpan and Shmuel Summer. Again, the Shira Gersh Shkef for coming, Imam from Chazak, the Oilam, and the Menachem closing words, and then the Shira.
Hashkoyach Shiva for all the words. Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of information, a lot of interesting questions, and obviously every question is unique and needs a lot of work. But like the Rosh Yeshiva started off and mentioned, the I plus I equals I. So rather you have to work on that first I. If it's your own self-esteem, to be able to build your self-esteem, see, even though you have your strength and your weaknesses, to be okay with it. And then you can accept your spouse's I. And if it's being grateful for what you have, even before the spouse, just being grateful for what you have in life, and start building that list of things that you're grateful for, so that when you bring that other I and you do it together with the other I, so you're grateful for what they have. So together you can build. And again, you can hear it once, you can hear it twice, but when it comes to Lamaisa, and it's hard sometimes when you're in a situation, you can't think anything else. You're in a matzav which you can't look out, you can't zoom out. But that's really the work, to be able to take a deep breath and zoom out and come back and say, do I want to take care of this? How am I going to take care of it in a way that I don't lose trust in the big picture? So Agresh and Shkoyach, thank you very much, and I give a bracha to all our listeners that should have atzlocha in their shalom bayis and their kids, and the see nachas, shidduchim, and all the zachen. Shkoyach.
Shiva, if you leave the oilam with some divrei chizik, the oilam that has good marriages, they want to get better marriages. The oilam that's struggling, for all walks of life. What could Shiva leave us off with some words of inspiration?
Person once came to visit my Tzedek Yankee in the house. He was mechabedim with some kind of dessert, a piece of cake, and he politely declined. Later, he mechabedim again to take it, and again he politely declined. So you have to turn to him and explain it as follows. What do you do as a living? I'm a Maggid Shir. He says, you're a Maggid Shir, wonderful. How long it's taking you to hear the Shir? A while. And you appreciate when the Talmudim come listen to the Shir. Yes, I do. He says, this piece of cake is my Rebbetzin Shir. She put work into it, she prepared it, and this is the Shir she wants to give. A piece of cake you take where you appreciate the Shir that she's given. We have to learn to understand that everything our wives do for ourselves and our spouses do for ourselves is their particular share. It's the personality, it's the preparation, things they put into this, things they become, and things they've done. Anyone who says a share, says a class, understands the frustration after all the work put in, and try to say a shir, try to say the class, and no one's interested in listening, it's so painful, it's so frustrating. It's so important. If our approach to our spouses is a life here, there's a person here, there's so much this person has to offer. This person has quote unquote a shir to give. I should appreciate that shir, appreciate all that shir is going to be. I've committed to this marriage. Let us enjoy the shir together. Listen to mine, I'll listen to yours, and together we'll make a beautiful shir. That our shiurim should be developed. Thanks for listening.
Oh, yeah.
Coming, see everybody next week, same time, same place.